listeners, welcome back once again. It's time to postulate. Welcome back to Lost in Postulation. I am Neil Fitzpatrick and I am joined. We love him and we can stomach him. It's Nicola Volpe.
Hey.
That's a quote of some kind.
Here I am. And while we're at it, shout out to all our listeners in St. Paul, Minnesota. We did it, baby.
We made it.
How
about that? Actually, we'll get into it, but did he win? Did he really win? Or did he, in fact, we're talking about Tom, of course, did he win or did he kind of lose?
It's all relative, and I don't think he gives a damn.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, no, I definitely don't think he's happy, let's put it that way, with the outcome. But am I happy for him? Certainly, relatively, he's done well. For St. Paul, he's repping.
It's huge for St. Paul. I think the biggest win for the Twin Cities since the Minnesota Twins won a World Series back in 91, I think.
That is saying something. Yeah. 30 years later, 32, yeah. Well, wow. Welcome back to Postulation City.
It's great to be back. Thanks for stepping in last week with a very somber intro all by yourself.
Yeah, probably not intentionally somber, but I think it reflected how sad I was feeling about not having a full episode. So there you go.
But came across, like a very serious professional, astute.
We're going for professionalism, if nothing else. I did, as I said in the episode at the end, I did enjoy pulling it together, actually. It was nice to listen back and to hear a bit how far we've come from both an audio quality perspective and also a, dare I say it, quality of presentation or performance perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, let us know if you enjoyed what we released last week from the archives, a bit of a mashup, because we'd love to keep doing that, to keep providing you with snippets and categorizing, clustering things together, right?
Yeah, I think so. And it's not what we want to do every time, right? But as we've talked about off air, this is a way that we can continue putting out content when we otherwise just couldn't or can't. So we'll only do it when we have to, let's say. But I do think it's nice to provide, a unified view on certain topics. Like there's other ones like the Chris Rock saga that we've actually talked about over multiple episodes, right, which I think would benefit from being pulled together again. So we'll see. But let's say that the intention is to do it live continually.
Yes, absolutely. Any questions, comments, complaints, as usual, tweeting at Neil Fitzpatrick.
Good luck with that because I won't see it, but please do that and let me know how it goes. If that fails, you can of course reach us at impostulation on twitter.com, or you can email us at lostinpostulation@gmail.com.
Wonderful. And while you're at it, anything helps in terms of reviews, in terms of sharing the podcast. Anything really helps to grow. We'd love to be on this journey with you guys. Let us know. We'd love to involve you in the podcast more and more, and any of your friends as well.
Guest postulations always welcome.
And while we're here talking about postulations, Neil, let's kick things off, as always, with a mundane postulation.
Let's.
Now, as someone who keeps his foot firmly jammed between the door that leads us into the music industry.
I love that. Yes, that metaphor.
That's you.
I'm that guy, yeah.
I want your take on cover music, on cover music of very famous songs. The reason for this, I was on holiday, I was at the beach in Greece last week, and everywhere we went, it was cover versions of everything. In the Spotify era where you would assume, you're not getting any economic advantage from constantly playing cover music.
Yeah.
It got to the point where it was so annoying because they were all songs I love. I mean, you were getting Prince, Elton, Phil, whoever, all covered constantly. I want your take on cover music.
I wish I had. This is the type of thing that definitely has a really good explanation for it. That there's probably some economic reason why these, I guess, bars, restaurants, where was it exactly? It was
in Greece.
In Crete or
Samos, Greek island. Yeah.
So an island, because potentially my explanation was maybe 30 years ago, before Spotify and the internet, you would have to kind of pay money to have a license to use real music, or you could buy a CD of cover songs and just play it on repeat and not have to pay anything, something like that. This is my postulation basically as to what it could be. There is also, though, what I've noticed to be a growing subgenre of music, which is indie alternative acoustic covers of big songs.
Yeah, that was part of this.
Where you get sad versions of otherwise happy songs, where it's a breathy female vocalist going really breathy, emotional. That wasn't always the case, though. You're saying it was like close covers to the real thing, like
Close covers. Some of them were like the acoustic rendition of something with just like a crazy electric guitar, right? But
yeah. I could see that in like kind of relaxed beach bar vibe places or like kind of spa beach.
so that would be okay, you think?
I think that would be what they choose, actually. That they go, I've got just the thing. Let's do jazzy covers of Metallica or whatever, you know, and that'll be like the concept. So you asked for my take on it. I'm broadly against covers, and anyone who I've been in a band with knows or would remember probably that whenever it comes up as a topic where someone says, hey, let's do a cover, I'm like, only if we can do it in our specific kind of thing, you know, in our wheelhouse,
Put your spin on it.
yeah, like matching our genre, and therefore let's pick a song that doesn't match our genre, because the point is we're here on stage showing what we can do with this inspiration, right?
Okay.
What I'm definitely not here to do is to like stand up and do a copy paste of the song to try and ape it as close as possible, because for one, you'll fail instantly, like you won't be as good as the amazing artist who recorded it initially, and then two, you don't get a chance to actually showcase any creativity on your own part. So I guess my point is, when I see someone do a cover, I love and appreciate if they can show their interpretation of it. During the Eurovision, there was did you watch the Eurovision this year?
Bits and pieces.
It was actually pretty fun. I was surprised to enjoy it so much.
You as definitely not a Eurovision guy.
Not usually, but then we sat there and we did our own little version at home, me and Yura, where we gave each country a score, and then we predicted where each one would come.
Oh, okay.
And then
it's fun.
I, of course, turned it into a whole Excel thing and made a ranking system. It was great. But the main point being, there was an opening act where they took Eurovision legends from the past, say, 10, 15, even more longer term, and they just did a load of Liverpool covers. So they were covering loads of different Liverpool songs, because that's what it was. Yeah. But Daddy Freyr, the Icelandic artist who did one of the most popular songs from the last 5 years of the Eurovision, Think About Things, great song. He did a cover where he just completely turned it on its head, changed the rhythm of the chorus completely, and that, as we were watching it, I was like, that's a cool cover. Like he's done something with it. At least it may not be better than the song, it might actually be worse than the original, probably is, but he did a great thing with it. He did like something original.
Something spicy, something different, right?
You've set me off here on a long tangent, but how? What's your take on these?
Well, my take is that to listen to, if I have to choose, I'm never looking for covers, right? Especially of such hits, I'm looking for the original. Now, what you said from a musician's perspective, that's why I asked, right? From a creative process, yes, it is a lot more impressive to do a good version of a cover where you put your own spin on it, I think. At the same time, if I'm sitting at the pub and there's live music that night, do I want Wonderwall to sound like Wonderwall and belt out with all my friends, or do I want a cheeky little indie, different paced version of Wonderwall? I probably want something quite close to the original.
Context is everything here. I'm seeing that now, yeah. I suppose I'm talking about when you're doing a gig as a band where people are in theory here to see your band or whatever, in a pub environment where it's cover central, then I'm like, just do a fun recreation of the song that people will, you know, sing along to. Basically, it's like karaoke, you know. Yeah. So I'm with you on that. I wouldn't support a creative cover in like a singer-songwriter at a bar, like you'll find thousands of in Dublin, you know, that kind of thing. That's then I'm like, just do the song, just recreate Wonderwall, you know.
Speaking of finding thousands of it in Dublin, why are Irish people so attuned and so good at singing generally compared to people from other countries?
I would just turn that around to say, why is everyone from other countries so bad at singing?
Wow, okay.
Right? But it's just one of those weird cultural embedded things that every single guy I know, genuinely, in Ireland, can play Wonderwall.
It's true though, right?
Yeah.
And they'll be the guy with the guitar at the party, which all the other guys hate because everyone's flocking to them.
A lot of the girls too. Actually, no, more and more.
I've seen you do it. So.
Yeah, it's one of my... I don't do it so much these days, but
well, no.
Still, it is something that happens, and it really is a rite of passage for many guys. When they get to, in Ireland, I guess, age 12, 13, a guitar is in every house, by the way, in Ireland. At least, like, there's one in the attic. You'll find one.
That in itself is already a very interesting phenomenon.
They're omnipresent. A guitar or a piano you'll find in or like a keyboard or something, you know. But you will then be able to go to YouTube or Guitar Tabs, ultimateguitar.com, one of those. And honestly, Wonderwall, you can learn it in half an hour. Like it, I don't know if you've ever tried. You tried a bit of guitar, or
I've you have taken other people's guitars and played
you have one though. You have one at home.
Well,
right?
it's my wife's. Yeah.
But you could.
I could try.
You could by tomorrow. In 24 hours from now, you could play Wonderwall. That's for sure.
I think you're really
Not well.
giving my musical abilities more credit than they deserve.
No, I've seen
I
you
played clarinet for almost 3 years.
Well, then even better. I think you really could do it, because literally Wonderwall, your two little fingers, your ring finger and your little finger don't move for the entire verse, and all you're doing is 4 shapes with your index and middle finger.
Yeah.
And once you learn those, you're home free.
Yeah, but there's a whole other part of the equation, which is then the singing of it.
Yeah, true. But
Right.
you could be at the very least, you could be the
accompaniment.
rhythm guitar for Wonderwall, you know? But yeah, I get what your point is. Like, somehow Irish guys can both play and sing and like do a version of Wonderwall, which is not terrible. But then again, once you sing the first line of Wonderwall at a party, everyone is singing along.
Right.
So your
You're
voice
covered.
just falls into the background. Nobody really notices. So
Fair
yeah,
point.
It's
Fair point.
it's a good strategy. Yeah.
But there must be something, culturally going back, to your Celtic and Gaelic Irish ancestors, where music has always played a role, right?
Yeah,
Because
100%.
it's
Folk and trad,
disproportionate.
it's a huge part of our history,
Right.
and still a big part of our culture today. And here I go with another shout out for a band called Lankum.
Lankum.
Lankum. They're a group from Dublin who are putting like a modern spin on traditional Irish music.
Okay.
They just released a new album, which I'm floored by and keep coming back to. It's a bit heavy. There's some parts that you kind of have to troll through with them, but then there's some songs which are just bangers, start to finish. And one example of how traditional Irish music is still alive and well. There's many others. The Ollum, a really interesting American band who are playing trad Irish music still, and many others besides. So if any listener is interested in traditional Irish music, you have actually a wealth of options available to you.
There you go. From cover music to why every Irishman can play the guitar and sing Wonderwall.
You can never really predict where these are going to go, but nevertheless, here we are.
But speaking of Wonderwall, I know the Gallaghers are from Manchester, but Gallagher, it comes across as a very Irish name, or am I mistaken?
I think it is. And this is one where in the UK, they'll pronounce it as like Gallagher.
Gallagher.
If you're from Liverpool, like Gallagher.
Right, yeah.
But in Ireland, we would call it Gallagher.
Gallagher.
Yeah.
Okay.
You might not even aspirate the GH that you just did. Like, you might just say Gallagher.
Okay.
Like that.
I'm doing more Dutch. Gallagher.
Yeah. Gallagher. Oh, the hit design. No, that's, I don't have.
Professional
Leave it.
accentologist,
Yeah,
as
there you
mentioned
go.
2 episodes
There you
ago.
go. It comes back. But Gallagher, yeah, you do hear a lot of Gallaghers in Ireland. Don't know the etymology of it. That's one that I would love to have prepared in advance, but here we go.
Me too.
I'm riffing off the top of the dome. Maybe I can promise that in a future episode if we come back to name etymologies. Yeah.
That could be really good. As we learned, you are Neil, son of Patrick.
Actually, one interpretation, yes. The less generous interpretation, MacGillifodric, the Irish.
MacGillifodric.
MacGillifodric directly translates to son of the servant of Patrick. Gilla,
Oh, wow,
meaning
okay.
servant. Now, when I learned that when I was growing up,
One of the caretakers.
I quickly forgot, or intentionally forgot that particular part of the translation. If it was son of Patrick, it would just be Macfodric or like O'Fodric or
So
something like that.
MacGillifodric.
Yeah, that's where Fitzpatrick, or how Fitzpatrick has been translated. However, interesting fun fact: Fitz derives from the French
fils.
Yeah. So it's not just Irish that has impacted Irish names today.
Well, that's
There you
lovely.
go. On that amazing point that listeners will be enraptured by, I'm sure.
That bombshell, listeners. We're going to take a quick break, and then some of you know what's coming. Welcome back, listeners. Neil, here we are. At the time of recording, less than 48 hours from the release of the season finale, the all-time series finale of Succession. We made it. How do you feel?
Elated. I'm delighted by how well it ended. So spoilers. There's my take. I loved it. I'm even less. I'm like less than 24 hours removed from having watched it. So I'm still a bit reeling and still kind of processing it, reading what I can online, trying to make sense of it all. But my short answer is absolutely loved it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked the whole season about, are they going to land the plane? How are they going to do it, etc. In the end, it felt almost easy for them. It didn't leave me desiring anything. They did such a good job, episodes 1 through 9, that they literally just had to land the plane on the runway. We didn't need a 360 or anything crazy, but still one of the most riveting 90 minutes of television I've ever seen, regardless of that.
Insanely well crafted. There's so much you can say about the episode. We'll get into, about how specifically they drew the two opponents towards each other, like who was it going to be? Was it a yes or a no from Shiv kind of? But the way that they built it up, we paused it a few times as I was watching it, and I thought I really had it sorted after 20 minutes. I was like, okay, there we go. Like, it's not going to be Tom, because we saw that in the first 20 minutes. So usually what Succession does is like shows you what's going to happen in the first 20 minutes and then does the opposite in the rest.
Exactly.
But this was not that, actually, because they showed what was going to happen. Then they showed something else that was going to happen. And then it was, Anyway, I just thought super well constructed that somebody who has been watching the show all the way along, who thinks they've got it all figured out and knows the tricks of the trade, still couldn't really quite call exactly how it was going to land.
No, exactly. And I think in a way, and not just because of the length being these 90 minutes, right? It's kind of a mini Succession movie where all the themes have kind of come back. And I mean, I wouldn't encourage anybody to do this, but I almost feel you could watch that as a standalone movie without having watched, I know it's bold to say, but without having watched the previous 38 episodes, and it would still be incredibly compelling. You still get so much from these characters. Obviously, not as much as us that have dove deep into it over the past 4 or 5 years, but that's how solid it was that it could almost be a standalone, even though it's the last part of 39 episodes.
So you could say, I totally agree that it could stand alone, and I would actually be very interested to have a lab rat, some kind of an experiment with someone who's never watched it. Just say, watch this episode. Did you enjoy it? My prediction is, what they would say is, this seems really cool. I think I would like this, but I have no idea who anybody is or what's going on.
Right.
So my point would be that you could make a 90-minute Succession movie with this episode's content as the plot. All it would need, I think, is a little bit more exposition at the start. And just the pure scene setting of like, hey, you're my brother. That's, just that classic like setting the scene dialogue that you get in episode 1 of every series.
Yeah. What I found interesting is that whenever you come to the end of a long drawn out series, especially if you've been current with it, like while it's airing, right, like week by week, etc., it's always a bit melancholic, right? But with this one, even though the closure we get is, you could say a bit open to interpretation, it's enough that I don't even want one more episode, let alone another season. That's how perfectly executed this was.
Totally. I think Jesse put it unbelievably well, Jesse Armstrong, in the Inside the Episode clip that they uploaded straight after, where he said, the story continues, these characters will continue, but this is where the show loses interest in them, basically.
Exactly.
The show is about the succession. That's from the start, that's the name of the show, that's what it's all been about. And we as viewers then, as the show ends, it's not suggesting anything really in terms of finality. It's not saying, and everyone is done now and that's the end. It's like, these guys will go on. Probably Shiv is like sitting in the car plotting her next move with Tom. Is she going to stay with him? All these things.
They all remain billionaires, just to be clear.
Oh, like very wealthy billionaires. Yeah, they just got the biggest payout of their lives, right? So it's very much going to continue, and it's left to your imagination really to fill in the blanks of what you think is going to happen. But that's just not the point. Like, what happens from here is irrelevant to the show of Succession. What happens, or what's relevant, is everything that has happened to this point and got us to this point.
Right.
So I think that was just so well executed on that.
Exactly. And it's kind of like when you have those biopics, let's say, there's the approach where you try and fail to cover a whole person's life in, 2 to 3 hours or whatever it is, or where you focus on a certain period of their life. And I think that's kind of the school of thought that from the series point of view that Jesse bought into. He said, 100%. Okay, this is a story about now 2 to 3 years of this family's life and everything that happens there. And that's kind of everything kind of happens in those 2-3 years for you to also imagine what happened before and potentially what happens after.
100%. And everything's there, right? It's like Shakespeare or Beckett or one of these. It's extremely dense, but everything is on the page. That it's for you. Like, there's no bonus information that we can go Google or find out. Like, the show is so smartly constructed in the sense by Jesse that he has left all the clues and everything's in the writing, right? Yeah. So it's done. It's perfect. It's like if anyone is asking for an additional season, they've missed like the point, of what this whole thing is about.
Yeah. But having said that, I felt like I had watched some prequel show with the Roy siblings as kids. Exactly. I felt I knew everything that shaped them up until here, for example.
100%.
Even Logan's career and everything. without actually having seen that, you get kind of what I mean. Everything was there, like you said.
But it's tricky as well, like we talked about before, because there is an analog for Logan Roy. You know, like we do have some very close characters to him in the real world.
Oh, absolutely.
And I do feel like we attach a bit of that. Our understanding of those people gets attached to him a bit. And same with Mattson, for example, where I see a bit of Elon and a bit of Mark Zuckerberg and all that.
Absolutely.
You know, inevitably. And I think he would say, Alexander Skarsgård says himself that those were, you know,
his inspiration.
An inspiration, maybe not exactly. He's not doing an impersonation of them, but like, so I think that's why we feel so familiar with these characters, just because they're so well acted, so well performed, but they are also heavily inspired by real people that we have seen for years and years. You know?
The right show at the right time, right?
100%.
Spoke
so
exactly
timely.
to what we need.
Exactly. And what did you see Jesse Armstrong's point? He thinks that this is the best thing he'll ever write.
Yes.
What do you make of that? Like, do you think that's true, or is he just being modest?
I think what he added to that was because it's a space that he's just so interested and intrigued in. And I think, you know, that says a lot when you have that kind of Venn diagram intersecting between what you love to do, what you're good at, what you're interested. And I think that probably was this for him, right?
Yeah.
And it's also a space, we were texting about it a bit last night. I think there is so much there that I'm interested in that space, but I don't think he can tap back into it without, you know, disappointing himself more than us probably.
Yeah.
We'd love it.
I think that's probably the case, that he will go on to do massive things. And I guess we'll talk about that as well, of what's next for the creative team. But I don't think he'll ever do something that he feels so strongly about and has such a passion for it than this, you know? And that's a shame, but at the same time, it's like, isn't it great that someone got a chance to make their masterpiece, you know?
Yeah.
That really, this is like probably him at his firing on all cylinders at the best of his abilities. And it's perfect. And he absolutely nailed it.
And there's a universe where this show would have just been another Billions on Showtime, right? Just the cool private jets, Wall Street, whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, it was about the sadness of that side of things. It was about Roman, for example, you know, being abused as a kid by his father. Kendall being conditioned, being told when he's 7 years old, you're going to take over the company, and how his whole life is leading up to that. It was actually, and I don't remember if it was Jesse or somebody that said that on one of the follow-up podcasts. It wasn't about making the characters likable, but still humanizing them.
Yeah.
And that's where they hit the nail on the head, where you can humanize despicable figures. And that ends up being something so compelling to watch that's character driven and not necessarily event driven. Like half the time you couldn't care less about the bear hug here or the acquisition there. It's about what's going on in these characters' heads.
It's totally true, although I would commend also their ability to make us care about those things. Because if you remember, even in this season, there was the India numbers in episode like 7 or 8 or something, where that suddenly became a massive deal. And me as a watcher was like, oh my God, then the India numbers are fudged, right? Like, this is crazy.
You're so into it.
This is gonna change everything. And that, sorry to say, that one plot point kind of went nowhere. Like that was I don't know what they were planning, or if it was going to be a bigger point or something, but I don't think it was actually, like, to use the phrase that Jeremy uses, dramaturgically, like I don't know if that really was necessary. And therefore I reflect back thinking, how did they manage to make me care so much about something that literally did not matter at all?
Which then they threw out so easily because Shiv advised Mattson to just talk about it when all the election fiasco post-election day is going about, so it gets lost, right?
Exactly.
And that's what happened.
I mean, overall, I don't want to get critical really, because overall it was so well done. And all the other beats of this season, when you look at the election and how that leads to Mencken, who wants an American CEO, all of that, it had a really nice chain reaction to it, and that all sat together well. It's just that India stuff, the only thing it really did was got Ebba on their side, on the Sibs side a little, or on at least the boys' side, right? That she kind of confessed that to them, and then they set up a bit of a back channel to her. But like, I don't know. That was the one area where I was like, don't really know. But
I think part of it is the device that writing room that's what Jesse loves to do, which is build somebody up to the top of the mountain. You think Mattson is a genius, and then you're like, whoa, is he just doing the same stuff as Kendall with Living Plus?
Yes.
Is he even that good? Is he even that smart, right? Like that's probably the purpose they serve.
100%.
But yeah, I get your point about being so engrossed in it that you're living it with them. I mean, multiple times I was like, oh shit, the retreat in Norway's tomorrow. Oh shit, the funeral tomorrow. Like I'm one of them, you know,
and
like
getting into
going
the,
insane.
like getting into the negotiation of it as well, like where it's like 50-50 stock cash split, like all these like details, and then the variables that they traded through that negotiation. It was just so like you feel you're in it as like some kind of corporate M&A lawyer. You're like, I could do it. That's a great deal. Like,
exactly.
So like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but
$5 million.
yeah,
Good deal.
And then Mattson comes with the power play crazy offer. It was just so good. My God, I'm going to miss it so much. I hope there's something as good coming along, because really now there's going to be a real gap in my TV calendar.
I think so. And a lot of the discourse, we'll probably get to that towards the end of this pod, is that kind of the end of prestige TV as we know it, which they thought was over, you know, at the time of Thrones, etc. And then this kind of CPR revived us.
It did, in a sense.
To that level, defining like that, I don't think we've had that since.
But you don't get many of those.
No.
And maybe we should get into like where
Let's
it sits.
do it.
Yeah. So it's for sure in my pantheon of the top 5, right? Which is in, and I'm not going to order them yet, but just to give you an idea of where I'm at, it's like The Wire, Sopranos. Of course, you have The West Wing. I have in there. Band of Brothers. Beloved. I would have in there. True Detective season 1. I have in there, and probably this would be the 5th in that list. I don't know. Let's see where I place it in that list, but I would put Succession in there as well.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, for me, it's, I would say, a top 3 at the moment with The Wire and Sopranos. No particular order. I think also, I don't want to give it the 2 or the 1 now because of the incredible recency bias. And also we need to see how the thing ages, right? Yeah. Like, for example, how The Wire ages. I love it so much more in a way now than I would have 20 years ago, if that makes any sense.
I think it does.
Yeah. So I think we need to give it at least those 5 years to be able to say, oh, is it the GOAT or whatever? But the fact that it's already in that conversation now,
that's for sure. I think we can easily say that. Yeah. And those other GOATs that we mentioned, like we were talking about this in the run-up to this episode, they are the greatest of all time, undisputedly, but they're not perfect. They're far from it, actually.
Oh, definitely.
And you can pick holes in all of them, like The Wire season 5, we talked about, The West Wing in general, like it is very, very good, but like this, it falls off dramatically.
5 through 7
when Sorkin leaves, it's terrible. Sopranos has so much filler, so many episodes that were just for the laugh. There's
Hanks.
Yeah, dream sequences and all this kind of stuff where you're like, okay, let's move on here. But it's in spite of those things that they were still so great as they were. So I think you can find flaws with Succession. I'm not a huge fan of like the mid seasons of season 2 and 3. It lost me a little bit. I thought they would nail a season finale every single time, and they did do. It's just that some of the mid season I found was like a little wandering, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I think it's one of the best TV series of all time.
And I think what it comes down to is Sopranos, you're upwards of 80 episodes, right? The 39 episodes of Succession could dance with the 39 best of Sopranos.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Still.
I actually don't know. Like, Sopranos, for me, doesn't have 1 or 2, like, absolute banger episodes. At least, maybe I'm wrong on that, but...
Pine Barrens, maybe, where they're lost in the snow.
Yeah, that's a comedy episode. I mean, both right. But, like, I see your point, which is, like, it's a great episode, but... There's been many episodes where I'm rewatching it right now. So I'm on season 6-8 right now for the second time coming through Sopranos again. And there's many episodes where I finish it and we turn to each other and we're like, yeah, that was a seriously good episode. What an amazing, examination of a particular topic or theme. But there's never one where we're like, best episode of all time, Right. Sopranos, for me, the virtue of it sits on its construction and the arc of each character and how Tony evolves. And it's something else.
Yeah. And I think in terms of, they did it very differently, but they're both there in terms of the writing, in terms of, like you said, the character development, in terms of being funny.
Yeah.
They're both tragedies in a way, but they're both hilarious.
I would say Succession is a tragedy,
absolutely.
With extremely funny dialogue, with comedy as a key part of its storytelling. If you get me, There was a moment in season 3 that really stuck with me of Succession, where I don't even remember the exact context, but basically Logan was like on the run and in fear of being extradited to the US, and they're getting on his private jet to go somewhere, and it was like, where's Carl? And like, he needed to get a sandwich. He's getting a sandwich. And it's like, why? Like, if you were being really critical as as an editor, you'd be like, yeah, obviously cut that. That's irrelevant. But somebody, presumably Jesse, was like, no, keep that in. That's crucial to keep in, you know? And I think that's why it was such an amazing show, that it always found time and space for those kind of throwaways, which were in theory funny, but also like important, you know, in a weird way.
Yeah, in a way. In what they reveal about the character or whatever, right?
Exactly.
So I guess if you would need a tiebreaker, and again, it's not to rank them now, but, and we discussed this, we were texting about this last night, the depths of the characters and the level and caliber of acting. I mean, okay, Sopranos, Gandolfini, probably the best anti-hero of all time on any TV show. Maybe you throw in Walter White, whatever, but he's up there. But the rest of the cast, I mean, half the time you have the guy doing Sirico, doing Polly Walnuts, whatever, Imperioli. I mean, whereas here you have Brody coming in for an episode. You have Skarsgård coming in for half a season and killing it, and he's not even in the top 10 in the credits.
Every single cast member, basically, of Succession, I think, is knocking it out of the park on a weekly basis. Like it's so hard to find a weak link, actually. When was there ever a character where you're like, don't know about that? Like, every single one was like an inspired choice. Actually, Adrian Brody might be the only one where I appreciated his input, like that he was in that one episode that he was in season 3, but could have done without, actually. Just the fact that it was Adrian Brody, if you get me, because
and the fact that he only did it for one episode, right?
It's like, clearly it's him. Like, you know, the fact that we can't remember his character, we're here calling him Adrian Brody. It's like,
Aronson.
I think. I mean, what was the deal? Like, he was good. Like, he did a fine
he
job.
wanted to be on Succession.
Yeah,
that was the
that's unforgivable, because this is how Ed Sheeran got onto Game of Thrones, and it was a disaster.
Okay, well,
he showed up in like one of the later seasons, and it's like, oh, there's Ed Sheeran. Like, it was so awful, you know. But imagine if that Adrian Brody character had just been unknown actor A, you know, and then you would have really kind of been intrigued to be like, oh, what's this guy's deal? What's he like, you know? Because to me, Adrian Brody is Adrian Brody, and he'll do his Adrian Brody thing, and you know. Yeah. So I was a bit like, yeah, cool. Like,
that's a fair point.
If though, had Adrian Brody become a Mattson like figure, I would have been all over it.
That's
like,
probably
what a great opportunity, yeah. And what a cool thing to have, like this huge star in that role. But I just think Skarsgård was just unmissable, unmistakable as this.
I wouldn't have expected that based on his maybe cumulative 20 minutes from season 3.
Exactly, I was shocked.
He would end up being, you know, the pseudo Logan for the rest of this season.
I wonder, was that even the intention? When they were doing season 3, I think the Gojo thing was like part of the story, but not like central. Right. And then when they went away and started writing season 4, they were like, what if this Gojo thing actually is like fundamental? And we get Mattson like properly involved. Because really, like, if you ask me at the end of season 3, what do I think of the Mattson character, I was pretty cold on him, actually. I was like, yeah, he's kind of boring, tech bro, like asshole, you know. Whereas the different layers of him, and the funny side of him, and the weirdness and the Swedishness of him, that really came through a lot more in this season. And they really they gave him the finally, like, the actual fully fledged characterization that we needed. So I thought he was, in the end, masterfully done.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And he was great as a counterweight to Kendall, to Roman up on top of the mountain. I mean, it was just immense. But so many great characters, right? I mean, I would love to just spend 20 minutes watching the village elders, you know, Carl, absolutely. Frank, and Jerry sitting in a room just having some banter, you know, like that's how good it was. I mean, think of Lady Caroline. I told you, I was so happy we got her in this episode because what a character.
Yeah. Evil, like properly horrible.
What a mother.
But interesting, like a completely horrible mother, and a huge part of explaining a bit the siblings, right, and like why they became the way they are. It reminds me a bit of Ewan's eulogy in episode 9, where he tells the story about the two of them on the boat and the traumatic experience they had, and Ewan offers that as a kind of a context setting for why Logan was the way he was.
You feel a bit bad for Logan.
Exactly. For the first time, you're like,
I get it.
This does help me understand him a bit. And likewise, I think the more they showed of Caroline, the more we as viewers understood the siblings.
Right.
It was just continuing to paint just how horrible a childhood these kids had with this woman who was incapable of love, warmth, empathy, anything. In fact, mistreated them, something around not feeding them a lot. You know, like there was some kind of weird, almost unsaid parts where it was like implied. So I think the more that we saw of Caroline, the more we attached to the kids we got, or the more understanding we gained of the kids, which was like a really nice move as well.
Yeah, I think that's what we learned in that last episode, thanks to her appearances. They had nowhere to run to.
As
exactly. Bad of a father as Logan was, like you said, maybe she was a worse mother. Even in that episode, while they're in Barbados, she gets her, what we know now, scam artist of a husband, Peter Munyon, daddy's here, to come and pitch them on some scam.
With some like creamy margins, as he referred to it as. Yeah.
She doesn't give a flying F.
And then when the kids get rightly annoyed, she's like, "Oh, don't be rude, darling." Like, as it, like
so rude. What you're doing right now?
So rude. Oh, just like horrible. Like, actually, she was one of the few characters that properly wound me up, like as in emotional reaction to them. You know, like
but it's amazing what they did with these characters, right? Like episode 1, the one that they say separates the boys from the men, the girls from the women, right? When Roman rips up the $1 million check in front of the little boy while they're playing baseball. And I know, you know, for example, you were out after that and then came back, you know, later.
Yeah.
And there were so many moments where I found myself perversely, in a way, cheering for Roman, getting him, 100%. Having compassion, empathizing with him, as despicable as he was, like really being engaged in him, and not just with him, right? That's just an example.
With
also
everyone.
with the others, like how they managed to do that. Like
there was no character really that I was fully out of at any, where I was just like, well, I'm done with this person then, you know, like that they're just too horrible for me now, you know. Whereas in other shows, I think you do get that. Even Breaking Bad, like Walter, towards the end, season 6 kind of time, you lose all sympathy for it. You're just like,
he's gone too far.
You're just a demon. Like you're just a horrible person. Even Gandolfini, like in Sopranos, towards the end of season 5 and 6, you're like, well, like you're just off the deep end, man. Like, you know, I don't even really care what happens to you now, but I did still. But the point being, I suppose, that this show towed that line so well between irredeemable assholes and people, complicated people, but still, you know, people.
All right.
So good.
So good. So good. We'll take a quick break, listeners, and then we'll come back to wrap this up.
Listeners, welcome back to the final segment of this week's episode, all about Succession, diving into the finale and the series as a whole. We're going to get into 2 final topics which we wanted to cover on this episode. First of which is the creatives behind the show. Specifically, I think we can narrow it down to Jesse Armstrong and Mark Mylod. So Jesse, who did most of the writing, and Mark, who did most of the directing, I would say, through it. You asked me the question, Nicola, the other day of where does he go from here? Where does Jesse Armstrong go from here? Where do you think he goes from here?
I think first a nice little holiday, you know, somewhere in the Caribbean or something, right?
Yeah,
well deserved. Where does he go from here? I mean, again, like we discussed, I think what he's tapped into here is obviously a very rich vein, but he's also said he can't do it much better than that. I've heard his earlier stuff, which I haven't watched, was very screwball comedy-ish.
Oh yeah, you haven't watched it? No, okay.
No, did you?
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about it. So, like Peep Show, his probably most successful work,
right? Peep
first
Show.
and foremost. That's with David Mitchell and Robert Webb, these British comedians, which is so different. Like you wouldn't believe how different it is to Succession.
Okay,
but there were certain lines in Succession, even in last night's episode, which I was like, that could be straight out of Peep Show.
The crispiness of the writing is
the kind of punniness actually sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
You know when they were at the furniture reallocation thing, and I think Shiv put like a letter acronym on it, where she was like, "Oh, an FBD" or something. Like, you know, I was like, "Oh, that's straight out of Peep Show."
Peep Show.
It was that kind of that's the kind of humor you would get. Peep Show was interesting in just in the way it was filmed. It was filmed from a first person view of the 2 main characters.
Yeah.
So just from an interest point of view, it's worth checking that out. Actually, also now having seen Succession, you can go back and see a bit of the early influence of Jesse.
Okay.
From there, he went on actually to do The Thick of It, which you need to watch if you haven't.
The Thick of It, yeah.
Oh, unbelievable. And the only challenge with The Thick of It is here in Denmark, there's no legal way to watch it. There's no streaming service that has it, I don't think.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit stuck there on how to watch it,
All
but
right.
still well worth getting into.
Okay, but I don't know. I mean, I think with him, what I've seen is a lot of these actors he brings in are actually just theater actors. Well, just air quotes, right? I mean, our friend David Rash playing Carl, and then the one playing Frank, J. Smith Cameron playing Jerry. Maybe he goes and does, Broadway, or he does something in London on the theater in terms of having his fully owned production, having all that creative freedom. I don't think it'd be too much of a curveball with a guy like him.
Nothing would surprise me, actually. I think, as I was kind of reflecting, I think this is probably the most in-demand TV writer in the world right now, you have to imagine.
It's got to be.
So he's going to have the likes of Netflix, he's going to have Apple, Amazon, Hulu, all these.
He'll stay with HBO if he does TV, I'd say,
you
because of the freedom they give.
Like, 100%.
Right.
I mean, it certainly worked out well for him so far. But meanwhile, I would be pretty worried if I was HBO, because he's going to have Netflix coming with a gigantic skip full of money and saying, we will give you carte blanche, you do whatever it is you do. We don't understand how you do it. We just know that when we give you money, you turn it into towers of money,
Right.
So I think he will probably take like a few years to let those offers kind of come and go, and like let the heat die down a bit, see what comes to him from a creative perspective, like where he's being pulled, and hopefully do something really different, maybe comedy, maybe something like just totally out there. And I hope it's as good or close to as good as Succession. But I also think Succession is one of those magic once a generation, once a decade kind of shows that is actually even more than the sum of its parts in a weird way. If you took all those exact actors and that director and that writer, et cetera, and put it all together, it's even the music, it's even those little details that make it so good. Let's not forget Mark Mylod as a director, who's unbelievable, and we have absolute faith in, directed many episodes of Game of Thrones, even the later ones, which were dreadful. So it's not that he's without, sin here,
no, absolutely.
But I do think, like Jesse, Mark Mylod can name his price, and you'll see him directing Oscar movies in the very near future.
That's the thing is also with Jesse, he could go a bit the Sorkin route, where he kind of feels done with TV after The West Wing, and he ended up doing Social Network, writing that, right? Now he's directing stuff, which is a bit mixed received, right? But he wrote the script to Social Network, Moneyball, etc. What's to stop Jesse from going to the big screen if he feels, there's the right collaboration out there?
Well, he has been there before. I mean, you'll see on his Wikipedia, he has a few films, but it seems like he's never really struck gold. His probably most successful film was In the Loop from 2009.
Okay, yeah.
Starring Gandolfini, actually, among a few others.
One of his last.
But I've seen that and I didn't love it. There's something about the film format that doesn't work with Jesse necessarily. I'm not totally sure. This is very like a bit of a serious postulation on my part, but I just don't think he's able to do what he needs in such a short time frame.
Okay.
He needs like time to build things up and to get an arc going. And a film is just not his.
What about Mylod as a director? Because some of these episodes, like we discussed, were almost feature length.
These were innovative, those, and they were feature length and phenomenally directed.
Yeah.
I particularly
on film, not digital.
That's what I was going.
Huge.
That he employed a technique first used by Alfred Hitchcock in Rope.
Your guy,
where Rope is like one of the Hitchcock films that's filmed in one take, but of course reels were not capable of filming for more than like 10-15 minutes at a time. So they very clumsily in Rope they did these cuts where the camera would zoom in on someone's jacket and then zoom out, and it was like a new reel. But Mark Mylod did the exact same in several moments in this season, most notably during Logan's death, where he had each camera, Steadicam, going around where they would be live switching reels on one at a time. So they were able to do the whole thing in one take, even though they were running out of film each time.
Unreal.
Just thought that was, and one example of many of where his direction is just inspired and it's bold and a bit brave, and he's able to take risks and say, no, I really think we should do it this way, Also
how he set up the whole funeral episode, right?
Yeah.
Like
4
we
cameras.
just attended a funeral literally for an hour.
Exactly. And the shooting was kind of high risk, high reward, because I think he said something like they had 4 cameras set up. None of the cameras were in each other's sight line. So
Right.
they could just run the thing.
Yeah.
So people just did the funeral, but they only got time to do it like a few times.
Yeah.
Because you can't do the whole scene more than like 3 or 4 times before it's like, okay, we're out of time here today. Like
us with the podcast.
Exactly. Speaking of, yeah. So Mark Mylod, the only thing I wanted to have a look at is from his filmography, can we potentially predict, where he's going? So film-wise, he's done almost nothing. He did the Ali G movie, and he did The Menu. Actually, funny enough, that's an Oscar-level film that I don't think either of us saw.
No,
from last year. So that might be one to look into for his directing chops.
I mean, he's got show-wise, like you said, he was on Thrones for 3 years. The Affair with our guy McNulty.
Like that.
That was a Showtime show. Yeah, I don't know. But The Affair was quite long. The Affair was 53 episodes?
Yeah, but he only did the pilot. So
okay.
He was, one and done. I think actually he's peaked, right? Like, as in, this is by far his biggest achievement, this Succession. 16 episodes.
I mean, for all of these.
I mean, he hasn't directed every episode, that's fair. But, I mean, he was, of course, instrumental in the overall success. So I think it'll be interesting to watch him. And I'm super interested to see, does he stay with TV? Does he try and jump over to film or something? But I think for those two, it's a bright future ahead.
Absolutely. No doubt. Now, what about the characters, the character arches?
Yeah, let's finish on that. So what we wanted to get into here is thinking of the main sibs. Maybe we include Tom, maybe we include Claire. Let's see how we go with Tom. Which of their arcs from start to finish, from the very start to the very end, do we like the most, right? Which one do we think nailed the landing the most? Should we start maybe, start with whoever. You pick...
Well, I guess the most obvious point to start, because it's so full circle and running into walls while going around that circle constantly, is the Kendall one.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. What kind of journey did Kendall really go on? How different is he at the end than he was from the start? I'm actually not super convinced that he really changed, like
at all.
Yeah. The only cool thing I took from this episode was when the vote goes through and when he's told by Frank, you don't have it.
You never did.
You never did. He walks to the elevator and he presses the 0 button on the elevator.
You thought he was going to press top floor and jump?
I really did. I have to say.
Of course you did.
I really did. I think a lot of us did. But he presses the 0 button, which is an intentional decision, of course. And I think is a visualization of where he's accepting his level, because he's just been told by Roman, we're bullshit. Like, you, me, I'm just telling you because I know we're bullshit.
All of it.
So he walking to the elevator and pressing that 0, I felt was a very nice acceptance finally from him, where he's like, yes, I am literally ground floor. I'm nothing here. I'm out. Like I have nothing to do with this place.
Ooh, what a read.
Which I think is an evolution from start to finish, because from episode 1, if that's the case, from episode 1, season 1, he has this delusion so strongly held that he's hot shit, like really, you know, and it's time and again proven to him over and over and over again. He has a few high points, of course, but never really gets beyond the fact of he is basically bullshit.
But till 2 minutes before that elevator scene, he's saying, I don't know what else I would do with my life without having this job and all of that.
But using every pathetic card in the book.
Oh God, I
didn't kill the kid. I made that up. I'm the eldest
and
boy.
believing himself all set. So he becomes his dad in that scene, right? Because remember, no real person involved. And our PI, what he don't worry about that.
And he's shocked by that at the time.
And then he's doing it there.
Unbelievable. And it purely, like, it's so transparently, and his siblings see through it instantly, where they're like, no way, man. No, like, Roman is just like, absolutely no way, man. Like, this is so not what we want to have and see with this company. And ultimately, I like how the siblings kind of clumsily, not totally intentionally, ended up doing what was probably the best thing, which was to actually let the thing go. They get the payout at a very high price, and they don't get their incompetent hands anywhere near ruining the company any further than they already have.
I do think Kendall, though, now with his billions, tries and fails multiple times to set up his own thing and do it, right? So having said that, has he really come very far, or is he the same Kendall that we started with?
I think we have seen him through these water metaphors, right? Where
a lot of water.
He has spent so many episodes lying in water, face down, face up, swimming,
staring at it,
bathing, staring at it. But this is the key thing. I don't think we've seen him staring at water until the end of this episode.
Okay.
So maybe, again, to use the word like dramaturgically or, metaphorically or symbolically, what Jesse is saying here is for the first time, he's removed from what has been previously just his existence. He's able to look with this like third person view at the water, at the ocean, the thing that has been his life, and is able to see it for what it is rather than being in it and immersing himself in it. So you could argue, and this is all just like hypothetical postulation stuff here.
That's what we do.
I could make the point, I think, that directorially what they're trying to say is he's somewhat different, he's somewhat changed. But then again, what the series proved is that he's on a loop.
It's addictive behavior.
Yeah.
Shiv, Roy. Siobhan. Shivy, shiv.
Oh man, sad. The handhold at the end of this episode, I don't know if you saw that.
Limp.
Just from both sides, like Tom just limply turns over his hand and Shiv just kind of drops her hand in, and it's like the least emotional, affectionate thing.
But the key there being that it's Tom with the open palm.
That's
and
true.
her having to put her hand into his.
Exactly.
How that dynamic totally shifted over 39 episodes.
Oh, insane, the power. Like the purely unspoken power dynamic that we literally see visualized, right before our eyes. It's, for her, I think, so sad because her arc, I think, is the most different start to finish, where she has come into the show as someone who is bravely branching out from the family and trying to carve her own path and prove to herself.
Competent, somewhat skilled relative to all the others.
Trying to prove to herself as well as anyone else that like she's deserving of her place in the world and blah, blah, blah. And where does she end up? Just the wife of a CEO. And what else? Nothing, So she's unfortunately having proven to her in a very real sense that all of her aspirations and dreams about herself and thoughts about herself are all just false. So I think that's probably the biggest shift, the biggest downfall, actually, probably.
Yeah.
Potentially is Shiv.
Could be.
From my side.
And Romulus.
That's an interesting one, no?
Very. From both perspectives, also in terms of the actor's credentials. In the beginning, let's just take it from the Roman perspective. He's just, he's snarky. He's obviously disturbed. It's laugh a minute, joke a minute, clearly insecure, doing weird stuff all the time. I got super invested in this guy when, you start to understand and get the pieces of he was damaged.
Yeah.
He was so damaged as a child. He's not just, weird. And there's hints of that even, in season 2 when they're at the Pierces and Logan is like, Roman, laugh like a normal person. We didn't get you from a hyena farm. Or when he smacks him and then totally gaslights him. Oh, son, I mean, did I even make contact? Stuff like that,
was
right?
horrible, yeah.
And by the end, I feel like he is maybe the only one. Now you say maybe Kendall. But the only one that's truly at peace, when he's in that bar having that martini, which I think might have been his dad's drink, and he's having this smirk, and he's like, yeah, I'm bullshit. I know it now. Yeah. I'm self-aware. Yeah. I'm free. My dad's not around anymore. I got rid of the company. I can't. This thing that I've always said I've wanted, but deep down I know I've never really. I don't need to pretend anymore. It's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And that arc, I think, in a way, kind of beautiful.
Yeah, I think he grew a lot, and in some ways is just right back where he started. Because if you remember from the start, he was so hands off, like from the company, from everything, and he was almost aggressively hands off. Like, I don't care, not for me. I don't care. It's not for
he was out of it, right?
Yeah, he literally was like showing up at the random times to take some money or whatever, you know. And I think he's gone on an incredibly painful few years, getting tied up in this succession thing, and now is finally back where he was, which is like a kind of a weird, damaged, sad guy, but like nonetheless free of this horrible drama, this roller coaster that he's been on. The only thing I wanted to read though here was, if you go back and look at his face when he takes the sip of the martini, it's like so amazingly well played by Kieran, because he both smiles a bit and fights a sob almost. Like at least that was my view. They for sure probably took loads of takes of it, and he really they showed exactly the right moment, which is he smiles to himself with a genuine smile of satisfaction, and then has to kind of fight a cry to fight against crying, right there a second later, At least that was what I saw. And I think that's just a pure visualization of where he's at, which is like a mess, basically. Like he's emotionally destroyed. However, I like your point about he's kind of seeing the Matrix, right? He's like really, for the first time ever, had this epiphany about all of this corporate world where he's like, literally all of this is nonsense, at least in his view, you know?
Exactly.
So I think also a very satisfying conclusion. Would have liked maybe a little bit more of a wrap up on him and Jerry. I know that it was left open, and you know he may or may not have strong feelings for it. There were a lot of signs in this episode that he had strong feelings for Jerry.
Well, that he was so ashamed the moment she came into the office to sign all her papers and stuff, that he was really hurt by what happened there and how he sabotaged that.
Exactly.
Whatever it was.
If you watch when they were watching the VCR tape of the dinner, when Jerry comes on screen, he drops to the ground actually. He like loses strength in his legs, right? Which he kind of plays off as just, I'm just shifting around, but like feels like that was an emotional move as well. So I thought of those three then, I think for me, Shiv's one was the most kind of clearly conveyed, I think, through for me, the most interesting arc as well, where she's had to really go through hell to get where she is. And does she even like where she is? Is she even happy? Probably not, but no. It's where her destiny took her, you know?
Right.
So going back and rewatching it, it'll be so interesting now to really see, knowing where they all end up.
Right.
How much of it was telegraphed, how much of it was, you know, inevitable. I suppose all of it was inevitable, but yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Unreal. And in terms of the actors, right? Because I think we've all been on the Sarah Snook and Jeremy Strong trains, whether we like them or not, in terms of acknowledging, okay, these are some stars, right?
Yeah.
With Kieran, even on this pod, you and I have had the discussion where, yeah, he's just that funny Roman or just Kieran Culkin. This season really changed that for me, and I would buy his stock as an actor now.
I guess I do, yeah.
Dramaturgically
speaking, yes. I think he is a great example of role of a lifetime, which, similar to Gandolfini in Sopranos, it's like when you get an amazing actor, objectively great actor, and in a character that is just so suited to him. Yeah. So I'm not going to say anything other than let's see what he does next. And if he can do a straight man role, or, you know, something other than being Kieran Culkin, because if you watch him in interviews, he's very similar to Roman in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm interested to see what's his range, what's he able to pull off beyond being a creepy, slimy kind of guy. But amazing, and I think his Emmy is in the bag.
Yeah,
supporting actor.
Yeah. Supporting. Well, I think he goes up for lead as well. I think they all might. Right?
Actually, I wonder how they do that.
Supporting is going to be Carl.
That could well be. I actually wouldn't be. They could do an episode curveball, yeah. Absolutely. Or Mattson, or a Skarsgård.
Yeah.
He could be dropped in.
Yeah. I think maybe we ended on the fact that that's how good the show was, that we lost Brian Cox not even 3 full episodes in, 2 and a something episodes in. And we still felt his presence. Now that's credit to him, his presence throughout all the rest of the episodes, while at the same time everybody picking up the weight and us not missing him at all. If you told me going into the season they're gonna kill off the patriarch, 2.5 episodes in, on the one hand you'd be like, okay, well, it's about Succession. On the other hand, you'd be like, ooh, risky.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I actually preferred it without him, I have to say.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah. I thought
he left at the right time.
Yeah.
Could it be
there was so much that we needed to do without him, kind of. So it was like he bowed out at the right moment, you know. I think he overpowered, I think, a lot of the other characters and made them one-dimensional. Like any interaction he had with Tom was just like one guy up here, like 100% power, and the other guy down here, 0% power. So their interactions were very like simple, actually, and not that interesting. Whereas once he's removed, all of the power dynamics start to shift. Tom starts to have this kind of mixed level of power. And so it was actually, I thought, more interesting to watch the Sibs and the rest of the characters acting in his absence. Also that power shift between the execs and the Sibs, where suddenly the execs were like, you guys are kind of screwed, actually.
Yeah,
you know, like,
exactly.
Oh, amazing. But as you say, let's end on that. What a testament to the show that they can take away their leading character, the one who's kind of the centrifuge of the whole thing, and it still goes to higher highs and gets better as it goes on.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, listeners. From Dundee, Scotland to St. Paul, Minnesota via Barbados. Neil, thanks for these 4 seasons. It's been a pleasure.
It's the least I could do. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to the next primetime Emmy-winning show.
Until next time.